Hello, everyone. Welcome back. At the beginning of this course, I invited all of us to keep in mind that moral theology is not only about the question, what must I do, or what must I not do, but it is also and primarily about the kind of human being we want to be. It is not only about individual actions, but also about freedom and virtue and even sacrifice. It is not only about the law, but also about love. We are fast approaching the end of our time together in this course. For that reason, I want to complete the picture by saying that learning moral theology is not only a matter of personal enlightenment, it is also a way to become a virtuous and loving minister to and for God's people. I was pleasantly surprised by the level of sophistication and care most of you brought to the midterm exam. There, I was privileged to witness the caliber of minister you already are. Today's session is an invitation to confirm, refine, or acquire a set of tools that will allow you to become the minister that God wants you to be. According to Bretzke, casuistry, or the analysis of cases, aims to help individuals follow their conscience, recognize that it is technically impossible to foresee every possible set of variables, apply the objective moral order in the here and now, and choose the best course of action in the concrete, complex reality. This is done usually accompanied by a pastoral minister, clergy, chaplain, counselor, etc. And of course, by members of the Christian community, especially our family members, our relatives, our friends, our neighbors. We spent a good portion of our time together looking at Bretzke's model, so I'm not going to belabor that. But today we need to keep what we have learned in mind and apply it to a concrete pastoral situation. As we do so, I recommend we keep in mind Bretzke's 8 guiding questions. 1. What is my pastoral role in this case? And what am I being asked to do? We need to look carefully at what it is that we are being asked to do, both implicitly and explicitly. This requires empathetic listening, that is, an ability to enter into real communion with the people we encounter. Concretely speaking, we need to realize that the vast majority of the time, we're not being called to answer technical questions as much as to be companions and support to people who are seeking to discern what it might be that God is asking of them in this particular crisis moment in their life. In order to be of real help, we need to deal with the emotional messiness and confusion of the situation first, before we can actually help people make a well informed, conscience based decision. If we are serving in any official capacity, however, we must keep in mind that it is not only our personal opinion, but also the varied and complex body of church's teachings that people are asking from us. Number 2. What are the morally relevant features of this case? In order to understand both the person and the circumstances, we need to look broadly at all the available factors, facets, and facts if we are to help people discern, decide, and do what is morally upright. We need to make a distinction between morally relevant features and morally determinative principles. The former are aspects of the case we should bear in mind. We'll talk about the principles in just a second. Number 3. What are the presuppositions I and others bring to this case? In other words, is there a possibility that there could be another legitimate way of interpreting the various morally relevant features and/or of weighing the moral principles involved? Our awareness of our presuppositions will help us bring them into balance so that we can better respond pastorally to the people who is requesting our help. Number 4. What further information is needed in order to respond to this case? Besides being aware of our own presuppositions, we need to resolve any doubts we may still. We may need to uncover any morally relevant features that might have heretofore escaped our attention. In short, are we missing some critical information? That is, something we absolutely need to know. Number five, what are the moral principles operative in this case? We need to keep in mind that the application of moral principles is not a simple matter of mathematical deduction. We must discover the human dimension before we can call anyone to fulfill any moral obligation. In other words, putting our moral principles into action is a matter of discernment, followed by decision, moving to application, and followed by reflection, and if and when necessary, reform. We also need to keep in mind that the moral principles are already present within the situation, because the moral law, as we already saw when we talked about the natural law, is inscribed in our hearts. We need to respond to it by activating the disposition that God gave us. In short, in most moral cases, we must respect and nurture the individual's conscience, properly informed, formed, and thus free. Finally, we need to keep in mind that it is very rare indeed that one principle alone can determine just what should be done in any given situation. Hence, we need to engage in a discernment process to evaluate our relevant moral principles. Number six, what kind of pastoral response should I make in this case? It is important to remember that our primary goal is always person oriented. We need to help people develop and deepen their moral character instead of fixating solely on having them make the right choice or choices. Our ultimate task is to help people respond with creative fidelity to what God is asking of them, so that God's grace may enable them to be and to do what God wills. Number seven, what kind of pastoral strategies would I use in my response? Strategies are the effective steps we take to realize the goals we have uncovered through the process. Since human morality is primarily a matter of character formation and discernment, then our pastoral strategies should be aimed at helping people get in deeper contact with this character, which in turn will provide the moral code and reference point for their concrete decisions and actions. In a nutshell, our strategy may flow like this. We may or may not begin with prayer. You please need to refer back to Bretzke, and I love the way that he talks about that. For at times, we may be called to pray with or for people, but at times it may not be the most well-suited strategy that we need to use. Then we need to do something I called centering. Bretzke talks about calming down and moving away people from confusion, fear, shame, guilt, anger, loss of control, and despair. So centering means to bring into this chaotic crisis situation hope and faith and love. And then once we have prayed, if that was the case, or at least help people calm down, then we can help them decide, move, and apply all of this discernment process that we have been engaging with. And then, of course, they need to reflect, and if needed, they need to reform, they need to change. Keep in mind that the success of the strategy demands time, space, and support. Number 8, who and or what is most in need of reconciliation in this situation? Here, again, I love Bretzke's definition of reconciliation, which in his mind means needing to come to terms with the concrete aspects of a real-life complex situation that troubles the people that we are dealing with. So it is not the usual definition of reconciliation. It is more to come to terms, to come to grips with whatever it is that people are dealing with. Further, Bretzke offers us some other suggestions for our becoming the best minister that we can ever be. I'm just going to enlist them, but I think it's important for us to keep them in mind as we face these difficult situations, as we accompany people, as we form their conscience, and allow them to make the right decision, the best decision that they can make. Number one, Bretzke says take an appropriate amount of time, which means do not rush and set up follow up sessions if needed. Number two, track your questioning carefully. In other words, be judicious about what questions you ask and why is it that you're asking them. Number three, focus not only on the intellectual, but also on the emotional and affective dimensions. Here, I'm stepping away from Bretzke, but I recommend very strongly that you study emotional intelligence. It is very important not only to have all sorts of knowledge in your brain, it is important to know how to communicate, how to treat people, how to be with them, how to walk with them. Number four, take the problem seriously, but watch your problem solving tendency. A lot of us suffer from this messiah complex. A lot of us think that we have to solve a problem, but in fact we need to, number one, bring the person into a deeper relationship with God and entrust the person to God. In other words, don't play God, bring people to God. Number five, avoid adjudicating questions of moral guilt and relative culpability. Instead, Bretzke recommends turn people towards God's forgiveness and reconciliation. Number six, simply keep God in the picture. Number seven, stay in the present tense. It's interesting, Bretzke, as he's giving us, for example, a case about abortion, he is very clear about why is it that we have the need to go back into the past and kind of dig into whatever happened. He says, help the person move to the future. That is an important piece. Number eight, be careful of using technical terms and jargon. This is super important. Sometimes we think that we need to impress people or that we need to make sure that they think that we know what we're talking about. But in fact, in a moment of crisis, a lot of people simply would appreciate if we give them any kind of a guidance or support in simple terms, in terms that they can understand immediately. Number nine, be careful of suggesting an action plan if you do not know the person's situation adequately. And he says, of course, one size doesn't fit all when it comes to pastoral care. So just be careful before prescribing anything, especially if you do not really know what people are going through, what their lives are like. Number 10, track your own feelings and reactions. I love this. It is a very important moment to analyze and to understand and to accept with all humility that sometimes, even if we're ministers of God's kingdom, sometimes we have affinities and sometimes we like and dislike somebody or whatever they are saying or whatever they're doing. So he says, keep the person open to God's Spirit. Allow room for the Spirit to do the Spirit's work. And as you're there walking with them and accompany them, my phrase is, get out of the way. For many, many times, the Spirit can do a lot if we simply allow the Spirit to do whatever the Spirit can do. Number 11, don't feel you have to go it alone. And I love this. It's a very important and very wise piece of advice. Make sure to make referrals and ask for advice. You don't have to know it all. You don't have to solve it all. And you're not the Messiah. This is very important for all of us to keep in mind. And number 12, keep the person or persons in your prayers. This is a quick rundown of this very important chapter of Bretzke's book. Remember that this is about discernment and casuistry. It is very important to do this, as Bretzke invites us, with a human face. I ask you to please continue sharing during our threaded discussions. And this week, remember that you're invited to share a case in which you have probably been able to apply most of these things, or a case that you found very difficult and in which you feel that you didn't do as well as you could have. Remember, humility, vulnerability is a way to learn. And this week is all about becoming the best minister you can ever become. Thank you for your attention. As always, stay safe, strong, and healthy, and God bless. Bye-bye.